Hey, what's up everybody? Hammer Heart Metal Reviews here once again. Today we're doing part 4, the final part in my series that I've been doing, talking about going coast to coast, doing a little spotlight of my favorite bands from Canada. Just spotlighting the Canadian metal scene. I know it necessarily doesn't get the same level of respect or admiration as some other regions and other countries, but as I've gone through this 4-part series, I've given you about 100 bands to check out that really show why I think Canada has a truly flourishing and great metal scene. So if you haven't checked out the first 3 parts in this series, go check those out. Part 1, I did Western Canada. Part 2 was Central Canada. Part 3 was Ontario. And today we are doing Eastern Canada, being Quebec and the Maritimes. So admittedly, I don't know a ton of bands from the Maritimes, as you will see from this list. I only have a couple, so I would love to get some picks down below from you guys if you know any other bands that I'm not mentioning here. But before I get to the Maritimes, I will be tackling Quebec, and I have about 30 or more bands that I'm going to mention here. And even then, there's a shit ton more. Quebec has probably the best metal scene across Canada, and we're going to find out why right away. Because I'm going through so many bands today, I'm not going to be going into too much detail about each of the bands. I'm just going to tell you the band name, a little spiel about them, and move on to the next, because I don't want this to be an hour video and talking about 30 to 40 bands. I got to spend not too much time on each one. So without further ado, no specific order here like the other editions in this series. I'm just going alphabetically. I'm not picking favorites. So starting with Quebec, I'm going to go alphabetically here through 30 or more bands. Let's go. Kicking it off, Aeternam. This is some symphonic, folky death metal. Their album from 2022, Heir of the Rising Sun, was really epic, really solid stuff. Aeternam is a band worth checking out. Up next, going with Akitsa. This is some raw black metal with very unique vocals. Just typical Montreal style, French-Canadian style, Quebecois black metal. There's going to be a ton of Quebecois black metal on this list, as you will see. And yeah, these guys definitely needed to be mentioned. Up next, a newer project, Aufnorden. This is a hard one to describe. I'll still call it black metal, but it's got some folky edge to it and just a lot of fun, really bringing in like a unique sound to it. He's released an album each of the last 2 years, and yeah, just a really interesting take on like folky, fun black metal. Go check out Aufnorden. You might be very pleasantly surprised. Up next is switch it up, going with Beyond Creation. This is one of the bigger names in like progressive or technical death metal. The musicianship of these guys is just insane. Every album they've released is top notch. If you're into like progressive technical death metal, I mean, these guys, it doesn't get much better than them. So Beyond Creation definitely needed to be mentioned on this list. Let's come back with some more black metal with Cantique Lepreux. These guys, they just released a new album this year, actually, that's really solid. If you haven't checked it out yet, definitely go do that and check out their other material as well. Solid black metal band. Up next, a band that needs no introduction, one of the bigger names in Canadian death metal, and that is, of course, Cryptopsy. Brutal, technical death metal legends. I mean, their first couple albums, Blasphemy Made Flesh, None So Vile, that's the stuff of legends. Doesn't get much better than that. I don't necessarily love everything else throughout their career, but the album that they released last year was a nice return to form. It was pretty solid. But yeah, those first 2 albums, amazing. Up next, a very underrated band, Death Dealer. They had since changed their name to Death Dealer, but when they started out, it was Death Dealer. And this is just a super underrated underground gem of a band. This is traditional heavy metal with like great melodic guitar parts. And yeah, just if you're into that style of music and you haven't heard these guys before, go give them a chance. Their like earlier material, it just really shines. I think they've gotten back together under the new name to maybe tour and put out some new material. But yeah, really go check out those early albums. Amazing stuff. Up next, going with some more black metal with Deletere. So this is some more French-Canadian black metal. There's some ties from this band to Forteresse, who I will talk about shortly. Their album from last year was very solid. Just once again, more great French black metal. So much in Quebec. Amazing stuff. Up next, let's switch back to some more technical death metal with first Fragment. When I say technical death metal, they also bring in a nice like neoclassical flair to their music here. Their album from a couple years ago, I think it was called Gloire Eternal or Eternal Glory. Yeah, amazing musicianship, kind of similar to what I said about Beyond Creation. Like the musicianship from these guys is just next level stuff, really killer stuff. First Fragment. Up next, I kind of name dropped them before. Forteresse, easily one of my favorites from this whole list. Actually, one of my favorites from across the whole country, and just one of my favorites in general. Atmospheric black metal, got ice cold atmospheres, brings in some ambiance in spots. Like even from album to album, it's not always necessarily the same. I have an album like Les Hivers de Notre Époque, where it's really heavy on the atmosphere, but then like their newer album, Thames pour la Rebellion, is super aggressive in your face black metal, so they really know how to tackle whatever style they're going for on a specific album, and in my books, one of the best black metal bands out there, Forteresse. Up next, going with Fuck the Facts. This is some grindcore band that's been around for 20 plus years, still going strong. Female-fronted grindcore act, I should say. Yeah, just been around a long time. Definitely worth checking out if you're into grindcore at all. Up next, some more black metal, going with Givre. They actually released a new album just a couple months ago, Le Croitre, which was really solid. I believe they had a name change a few years ago. It was like Entheos. They'd kind of gone from Givre to Entheos and back. But yeah, another solid French-Canadian black metal band. Up next, another legendary death metal band. And while I'm saying we've got a lot of crazy black metal bands from Montreal, there's also a great deal of death metal bands. Gorguts, one of the biggest names out there in like avant-garde experimental death metal. Maybe in the early days it was more straight ahead death metal, and I mean like my favorite album by them is The Erosion of Sanity, their second album, which is, while still kind of experimenting a little bit, it was more of a straight ahead album, but then they've got really off the wall stuff like Obscura, and then their newer stuff, Colored Sands, is an amazing album. Luc Lemay, the man behind the band, just a mastermind. Absolutely amazing death metal band. One of Canada's finest. Up next, another one of my favorite black metal bands, and that is Gris, or Gris. This is some depressive, atmospheric black metal. Got some absolutely stellar albums like Il était une forêt and Alam enflammé l'âme constellée, which is a double album. Just really heavy on the atmosphere, and the depressive, tortured vocals just suit it so well. Another one that, in my opinion, is one of the best out there. Amazing stuff. Sticking with black metal, this time features a dude from Beyond Creation, but not in the death metal spectrum at all. This is straight ahead black metal, Incandescence. So it brings in the technicality from Beyond Creation, but to a black metal setting, and wow, just absolutely amazing stuff. Their album from a couple years ago, Le Coeur de l'Homme, is absolutely top-notch stuff. Go check out Incandescence. Up next, going with Kataklysm. Definitely one of the bigger names in death metal here in Canada as well. This is more on the like melodic death metal side with a healthy dose of like groove metal. When I was a teenager, I was into these guys. Album like Shadows and Dust got a lot of play on my CD player. These days, I don't listen to them so much. I kind of grew out of them, but I still wanted to give them a shout out. They're still a solid band. They're good live. My tastes have just changed over the years, but nonetheless, a pretty big name. Definitely worth mentioning. Up next, going with Keys of Orthanc. And this is some epic atmospheric black metal. Think like in the same vein as like Summoning or Caladan Brood. If you like those projects, definitely go check out Keys of Orthanc. It's not like pure worship of those bands. They do their own thing here as well and bring some uniqueness to it. But nonetheless, I mean, it's stuff centered around Middle Earth and Tolkien lore. But yeah, solid epic atmospheric black metal band. Up next, going with Martyr. This is a band that's been around a long time, technical death metal. I saw these guys live in the early 2000s. They rolled through my city, and they were a great live band, really technical guitar playing, and just really have a good, fun vibe to them as well. Maybe more of an underrated one. I mean, they're somewhat well-known, but not quite on the level of like Gorguts or Kataklysm or Cryptopsy or anything like that. But yeah, go check out Martyr if you're unfamiliar with them. Up next, another very underrated band, and that is Messiah Force. So this is a female-fronted speed/traditional heavy metal project that was around like late 80s, 90s. yeah, I think they only put out one album actually, and just super underrated. They may have gotten back together to do some touring these days. I'm not 100% positive on that, but yeah, go check out their one and only album. Another just hidden gem from the Canadian metal scene. Really good stuff. Up next, going with Miserere Luminis. This is some atmospheric black metal. It features members from Gris as well as members from Sombres Forets. It's a collaboration between those two projects, so it kind of sounds very similar to both of those, but it's still got its unique sound. They've only put out 2 albums, and both of them are absolutely outstanding. If you're unfamiliar with Miserere Luminis, change that, go listen to them. You will not be disappointed if you're into black metal. Sticking with black metal, going with Monarque, another one of the bigger names in French-Canadian black metal. Just, yeah, amazing stuff. Similar, I guess you could say, to a band like Forteresse. I mean, a lot of these bands have similarities, and kind of even some members might be playing in different bands at different points. But yeah, Monarque, another one of the top-notch French-Canadian black metal bands. Up next, I'm going with Moonlyght. This is some progressive metal with some folk touches. This actually was a side project from the guys from Sorcier Des Glaces, which I will be talking about them later, hint, hint. But yeah, this is completely different from Sorcier Des Glaces. This is really interesting, cool stuff, a unique approach to their songwriting. And I feel like this is another one that's a hidden gem that maybe isn't as well known, but definitely go check out Moonlyght. You will not be disappointed. Up next, NecronomicoN. So this is some death metal, but when I say death metal, these guys like wear corpse paint. It's almost got like a behemoth vibe to it. I absolutely love their first 2 albums, Pharaoh of the Gods and The Sacred Medicines. After that, they kind of switched their style a little bit, and while their newer stuff is still pretty decent, I do hold those first 2 albums in pretty high regard. So if you haven't heard them before, I would recommend starting with their first 2. Got more of like a Morbid Angel type of vibe to it, and I just absolutely love them. Really underrated death metal albums, those first 2 that they put out. Up next, going with Nordicwinter. This is some one-man atmospheric depressive black metal. He is very prolific at putting out albums. This guy seems like he puts out a new album pretty much every year, and I've yet to be disappointed by one. Just very consistently good, awesome stuff. Nordicwinter. Up next, let's switch it up again and go with Obliveon. This is some technical death metal, like proggy thrash metal, kind of all jumbled together. Another very underrated band with a very unique sound. Just, yeah, a hidden gem from up here in Canada that I feel like not enough people know about some of these bands. So definitely go check out Obliveon if you haven't heard them before. Up next, switching it back up to some more black metal with Orphique. This is some one-man black metal. His debut was from, I think, 2022 Consecration Cadaverique, and it was a very solid album. It actually ended up making my Albums of the Year list for that year. Just, yeah, amazing project. Go check it out. Up next, a band that I had the pleasure of seeing live a few years ago, and that is Outre-Tombe. This is some old-school death metal. I have a couple amazing albums like Necrovortex and Abyss Mortifere. Abyss Mortifere! Just fucking amazing stuff. Really got that old school death metal vibe that I like. And yeah, a great live band as well. Up next, going with Phobocosm. This is some more death metal, but a little bit on a different end of the spectrum, bringing in a lot of touches of like doom. I wouldn't necessarily call it straight ahead death doom, more on the death metal side, but heavy on the atmosphere and just really well done. Foreordained, their album from, yeah, that was just last year, 2023, was really solid. All in all, a band you should check out. All right, up next, one of my absolute favorites on this list that I still feel is underrated, even though I've mentioned them quite often on this channel, and that is Quo Vadis. There's some technical melodic death metal. Just absolutely amazing, especially their sophomore album, Day Into Night, one of my favorite Canadian albums ever released. I don't know how it doesn't get more attention. The musicianship on display on that album is absolutely insane. Their songwriting is perfect. I've seen these guys live as well. Their album after as well, Defiant Imagination, was amazing. Actually featured guest bass by Steve DiGiorgio. So obviously if they can get him to come play, they must be doing something right. But yeah, there was only a short-lived project, only put out the 3 full lengths, and they are done. But definitely go check out their second and third albums. The debut's a little bit rougher around the edges, still some good tracks. But Day Into Night, especially, if you have not heard Quo Vadis, please do yourself a favor and go listen to it. Up next, going with Serment. This is some one-man black metal, features like the man behind the band is in Forteresse as well, so very similar vibe to Forteresse, but obviously wanted to do something on his own here. Has only released the one album, but if you're into Forteresse, strongly suggest you go check out Serment as well. A band up next that I kind of mentioned before when I was talking about Miserere Luminis, and that is Sombres Forets. Yeah, very similar style to Miserere Luminis and Gris. I know I keep kind of repeating the same band names here, but there is a similar style for French-Canadian black metal that a lot of these bands share, but I love the style, and if you do as well, go check out Sombres Forets. Another band that I mentioned slightly before, and that is Sorcier Des Glaces, or SDG, easily one of my favorites on this whole list. This is black metal at its finest. Every album they've released is top-notch. Their self-titled album would be worth checking out. That's one track, like 45 minutes. But I mean, they got other great albums too. Moonrise and Total Darkness is possibly my favorite by them. The album North is great. Every single album they've put out is top-notch black metal. Absolutely love these guys. Go check out SDG if you haven't. Sticking with black metal with a band that really made a splash a couple years ago, and that is Spectral Wound. This is more on the raw black metal side, but when I say raw black metal, it's also extremely catchy riffs that will stick in your head. The vocals will, burst your eardrums because it's just screeching and rough, but I love this style of raw black metal. Their last couple albums, Infernal Decadence and A Diabolic Thirst, amazing stuff. If you're into raw black metal, you gotta check out Spectral Wound. All right, I got a couple more here from Quebec before we switch it up. Up next, another very unique and underrated band, and that is Thunder Rider. This is some epic heavy metal, classic heavy metal. I would almost say like Manila Road-esque. Like, it brings in some keyboards, which is very unique. Their songwriting is maybe not the most polished necessarily, but it really is adventurous, and it's just a lot of fun to listen to. If you have not heard Thunder Rider, go check them out. If anything I just said sounds familiar, not familiar, if it sounds interesting, because yeah, it's just a hidden gem of old school epic heavy metal that I think you might enjoy. And last but certainly not least, only last on the Quebec list because of the alphabet, and that is Voivod, a band that needs no introduction. Clearly one of the bigger names in Canadian metal. Progressive thrash masters, really a unique sound. No one really sounds like Voivod other than them. I mean, yeah, like I said, arguably the biggest name in Canadian metal. They'd be up there in the mix anyways, but yeah, that ends my Quebec list. But now I got a couple bands for you from the Maritimes. First up, we'll go to New Brunswick with possibly my favorite band across all of Canada, and that is Throssenblot. This features a guy, Joel Violette, who was in Woods of Ypres before David Gold passed away, but this is his solo project. He brings in guest musicians here and there, but this is like melodic folk metal mixed with black metal with such a dose of maritime folk to really give it its unique sound. And like no other band captures the Canadian sound as well as Throssenblot, in my opinion. It just sounds authentically Canadian, and I love the injection of maritime folk here. There's even a couple songs, and he's released an entire folk album where, like, yeah, it maybe wouldn't even be considered metal, but I love it nonetheless. But then you have a atmospheric black metal album like Metathonia that in my mind is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Absolutely love this band. Like I said, one of my favorite Canadian projects. Hopefully they release something new. Hopefully he releases something new. But yeah, now one more, going to Nova Scotia with a fairly new project, Boreal Throne. This is a one-man black metal project. The man behind the band, Morgan Ryder, just started this project. He's been in other bands, like he plays bass in Cigar Tear. He was in Vesperia, or still is in Vesperia. But yeah, this is his solo black metal project. And yeah, it like literally just released. I wasn't even aware of this until a couple months ago. But yeah, very solid black metal album. Definitely go check it out if you haven't heard it, and looking forward to more from this project. And that's it for this video. Like I said, I don't know too many from the Maritimes. Hopefully you guys can give me some more recommendations to check out. And likewise, I didn't really tackle the northern territories like Yukon, Northwest Territory, Nunavut. I don't really know any bands from there, even though I'm from up here in Canada. So if you know any bands from anywhere else in Canada, definitely give them to me in the comments of stuff I should go check out, because I'm always looking to explore more. Hopefully this list gave you some new bands that you can go check out, because that's what it's all about. Continually exploring and finding new bands and new stuff that might just please your ears. So anyways, until next time, Hammerheart Metal Reviews. Out.